Well, that noon lesson is what we're working on for this week, and that's a powerful letter.
You need this copy?
Yeah, I got one for you.
Oh.
There's two.
Noon.
So you've read it's three things. It's a letter, it's a word, and a name. Now, the letter means fish or spawning, the beginning of new life. Spawning means the fish are laying new eggs for new beginnings of the school of fish. And when Nicodemus in his nighttime meeting with Yeshua came, the very first words that Yeshua said, what was the very first thing he said to him? The first thing.
He said, "You must be born again?"
Yep. So here's Nicodemus. He's an old master teacher, a rabbi. How many thousands of disciples has he been teaching over his many years?
A lot of them.
And what he teaches is the Tanakh, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Does he know the Tanakh?
Oh, yeah.
If you ask him a question about any question, he knows where it's found, he knows who said it, when it was done. He can tell you that he knows all about the Tanakh except for one thing. He doesn't know what it's about.
Right.
Everything about it except what it's about. So what is it about?
Yeshua.
Yeah, it's about the new beginnings in Yeshua. Because now, has he ever read Psalm 119?
Yep.
Has he taught Psalm 1?
Yeah.
Has he taught the section called Noon?
Yep.
8 verses in section called Noon, number 14. Each of the 8 verses begins with the letter Noon. That's the way each of those 8 sections. Each one, the letters, the first letter in each of those sentences always is the same as the heading letter. Does he know that?
Oh, yeah.
So, when Yeshua said to him, "You have to be born again," has Nicodemus ever heard that before?
No.
Why not? It's in the whole thing.
Well, it's a new phrase for him because he said, "What does that mean?"
Yes. In fact, the way the Lord put it, it would have come across like
Yeah.
He said, unless a man's born again, he'll never see the kingdom. And Nicodemus had never heard of that before. So what is Nicodemus think he's being told?
Something brand new.
No, what's he think the Lord is telling him?
That you don't even...
You're not going to see the kingdom because you don't even know what born again means.
Yeah.
If you're not born again, you're not going to see the kingdom. I think it's just like a kick in the teeth, and he must almost fell on the floor when he said that.
Yeah.
So this was not a real mild-mannered conversation. He jumps up and says, "How can that possibly be?" Now he's not saying that Yeshua is wrong, but he's saying, you just said something I've never heard of, and I can't imagine how it could work. Now the fact is, in human reasoning, it is an impossibility. Nothing can be new again. Nothing can be made new again. If you bought a brand new car, the second you drive it off the parking lot, it's not a new car anymore. It's a used car, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Can it ever be new again? If someone is born in this world, that's the first time they begin to be conscious of things around them. Is that right? Can they ever start over and do that again? It's impossible.
Right.
It is impossible for something to be born again or to have a new beginning for humans, but for God, all things are possible. So God can do something that in our idea is absolutely impossible. It cannot be. If you had an antique automobile, maybe back in my lesson I said the other day, here's a guy with a 1903 curved dash Oldsmobile. Have you ever seen one of them? You know what it looks like?
Sure.
Well, looks like a horse buggy with no drawbars, but the dash was curved like a front of a sled. So it was called a curved dash holder. Really a pretty nice looking little car, 1903 model. I saw one. So you own one, but it needs to be restored, so you take it to a restoration shop. I want this car restored to new condition. Okay, we'll call you when it's ready. So 3 months later, the guy calls you, we got your car ready, Mr. White. Come and get it. You go in there, and there gets your brand new 1903 curved dash holder. Just perfect. You look it all over. Man, it's wonderful. You guys do great work. You're looking all over. Then you happen to look out the window, and out in the weeds, and there's your old car sitting in the weeds. And they said, what's going on? And the guy said, well, your car was in such bad shape, there's nothing we can do. Just build you a replica. Is that okay?
No.
How much would you be pleased to see
Not
that?
pleased at all.
Because a replica, even though it looks like new, is not. Even if they restored your old one to like new condition, it is still not new. It's still old. You can't make it new again. You can only be new one time. So what the Lord is telling Nicodemus, I'm telling you, unless you go through this absolute impossible procedure, you'll never see the kingdom. So how are you going to go through an impossible situation?
Leave it up to God.
It has to be God doing it.
Yeah.
So he illustrates this by the Jews who were in the Egyptian situation. So how did they get to Egypt in the first place, Israel?
Well, they went there like 400 years before that because they were going there for food, so they wouldn't starve.
Yeah, there was a famine going on. There was food in Egypt, so they went there. But the nation Israel did not go to Egypt. The family of Jacob went to Egypt.
Right.
It was about 70 people, a pretty good sized family, but it's not a nation, it's a big family. Brothers and sisters and mothers and aunts and uncles and in-laws, stuff like that. They all went down there. All right. But where was the nation Israel born?
Huh. Well, they were born the first time.
They were born in Egypt.
Yeah.
There was never a nation of Israel before that. And up till when they went down there, it was only a large family. It was not a nation. It became a nation in Egypt. So the nation of Israel was born in Egypt.
Yeah.
And Egypt is a parable of the world system as the political and physical world that we live in. Pictured by Egypt. So when they were born in Egypt, what was their situation?
They were born in slavery.
They were slaves, yes. What did they do as slaves?
Whatever Pharaoh told them to do.
What Pharaoh told them to do, that's right. Every Israelite there was born a slave. And when you're born a slave, is there anything you can do about it?
Nope.
That's just who you are. That's who you are, and that's what you do. And there's nothing you do about it. And how long do you continue to be that way?
Till you die.
Till you die. So, in this present world, everyone who has ever lived in the world, from Adam till now, and from however continued is born in this world as a slave to sin. Is that right?
Yeah.
Why are they a slave to sin?
Because there's nothing they can do about it.
Yeah, but what makes them a slave to sin?
They do whatever sin tells them to.
Why? That's what they do, but why? Why do they do it?
That's the way they were born. They were born into it.
How they became born that way?
It's just the way.
Who's your
the way the world
progenitor? Who are your progenitors?
Well, my mom and dad.
And
Adam.
Yeah, it takes it all the way back to old man Adam, right?
That's right. That's right.
All right. living thing. There's trees, birds, people, a dog, a cat, a fish, everything that is alive has a nature. What does it mean? What's your nature? What does that mean?
It means that's just how you are.
Okay. We have a thing called DNA. What does that mean?
It's a chemical blueprint of who you are.
That's right. And it determines your nature, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It determines whether you're male or female. It determines whether you're a man or a puppy dog, right?
Yeah. Statistically or strong.
Everything there is about you is tied down to this thing called DNA, which is really I don't even know what the definition means exactly, but it has to do with what your nature is.
Yeah.
What your nature is whatever you do that is natural to you. Why does a dog bark?
That's a dog's nature.
It's his nature. Does he have to be taught to bark?
Nope.
Why not?
Does it?
It just does it.
Yeah.
If you want your children to be bad, what do you have to do to teach them to be bad?
Nothing.
They will be bad automatically.
That's right.
But if you want them to do what's right, then you have to work on them, don't you?
You have to teach
because that's against their nature. Their nature is not to be righteous. Their nature is to be sinful or evil. They will automatically do evil. If you don't do anything well, just leave them alone, they will become evil, won't they?
Yeah, that's right.
Because that's their nature. God has a nature, does he not?
Yes, he does.
So what is natural for God?
Love, mercy,
and on and on.
On.
Every good thing there is natural to God.
Yeah.
Does God have anything in his nature to do evil? No, nothing in evil is natural to God. Everything is righteous. Right? Now, we were born in this world as descendants from Adam. And from Adam we got our nature, did we not? The nature of Adam was to be contrary to God, to disobey. And it became our nature when we were born. You were born with the Adamic nature. Adam means the man of the earth. The word Adam means red. Adom means really the color. Dome is blood, the color of blood. But it means literally a man of the earth, man of the world. So everyone who is born into this world is a descendant of Adam with his nature, which means without any teaching or anything to urge you to do it, it will do evil. It will. Just like a dog is going to bark. You don't have to teach a dog to bark. He will do it. He won't do it right at first because he hasn't got that in him to develop, but it will. If he's normal, there's something wrong with his voice. But he will bark because that's his nature. So it says in 1 Peter that because of the promises of God, we have become partakers of the divine nature. What's the divine nature?
It's that goodness and holiness and that.
Whose nature is it?
It's God's.
Mm-hmm. Now you're automatically, by being born, a partaker of the Adamic nature. But by the promise of God and your agreement with him, you become a partaker of the divine nature. So if you're a partaker of the divine nature, then what will you do naturally?
The things that have to do with God's nature. Forgiveness.
So
love.
You could sum it up with the word righteous. Maybe
Yeah,
everything that's right.
righteous, yeah.
That's what you'll do naturally. Is that what you always do?
Well, no.
Why not?
Well, because we are still troubled by this fleshly nature.
We have two natures.
We do.
Nothing happened to the Adam nature. We still got that. So, have you ever had an internal argument with yourself? I want to do this, but at the same time I don't want to. I should do this, but I'm not willing to do it. You find yourself arguing.
That's the Romans 7 thing, you know.
Yeah, so why do you have an argument going on with yourself?
It's that flesh and spirit argument.
So you got two natures.
Right.
One wants to do the will of God, one wants to do what Adam does. Adam disobeys God. So, what can we do about that? Is it possible to ever win the argument? you try to control that old nature yourself, you're going to discover that old nature is stronger than you thought. You can't control it. In fact, if you could control it, and by the way, what does the new nature wish he could do?
The new nature?
Yes. The divine nature. What does the divine nature want to do about the old nature?
Want to overcome it.
So if you, with the divine nature, could overcome the old nature, which is sinful, what would you need with God? If you could do it yourself.
If you could do it yourself, you wouldn't need God.
And if you could do it yourself without the needing of God, what would you do with God?
Push him to the side.
You would expel him.
That's right.
And so God has built into our DNA this one thing. You're absolutely, totally dependent on God. You cannot overcome the old nature by yourself. If you could, you'd make yourself into God. That's what you would do.
Yeah.
So, and the old nature would encourage you to do that.
Yeah.
And so who would win?
The flesh nature.
The old nature would win. So if you try to overcome it yourself, the old nature is guaranteed to win. And if the old nature wins, then what happens to your experience? It just goes upside down.
Yeah.
So here's in Israel, in Egypt, they're born as slaves. What can they do about it?
No.
So what's going to be done about it?
The Lord is going to step in and do something about it.
And he's going to do the impossible. What
That's
was
right.
the impossible?
Is for them to know what freedom is.
No. The impossible is to be born again.
Okay.
That's what Nicodemus.
Okay.
So the Lord's going to do the impossible. So he sends Moses down there with the demand on Pharaoh. And Moses' words to Pharaoh, literally, what would Moses tell Pharaoh?
Let the people go.
More than that. That's part of it, but not all. My God says, let the people go.
Yeah.
My God says that. Not me. I'm just me. But my God says, let my people go. Now, how does Pharaoh answer?
He says, I'm not going to do what your God says.
Well, he even went further. He said, who is God that I should obey him? If anything, he should be obeying me. I'm the God around here. I'm the big one. Whoever he is, I did not even recognize him. I don't. Who is he? I don't even know such a God. I have no use for him, and I will not let the people go. All right. So you know the whole story. You got the plagues, and those plagues were not designed against Pharaoh. They were designed against the false gods. Every one of those plagues had to do with some false god of Egypt. So that it says the plagues were striking the gods of Egypt. So why did Pharaoh think like he thought?
Because he thought he was a god.
Well, where'd he get that idea from?
Talk about the human nature, the flesh nature.
Well, Pharaoh decided to defy God. Why would he make such a decision?
Well, in his country, he was God. The people.
But who gave him that idea?
It was probably passed on by his dad.
All right, but where did his dad get the idea? Somebody, that's got to go back to some beginning of the idea.
Well,
The plagues were against the false gods of Egypt.
yeah.
So where did he get his concepts from? The false gods.
Gods, yeah.
Now, the false gods, they're not real. They're nothing but the imaginations of people, but they have a great deal of power over people, don't they?
Yeah.
Because people believe in them.
Right.
So the false gods, even though they're not real, they're not creator gods, they're not genuine gods, they're just concepts, but they inflict terrible power over the people because people with their old nature are vulnerable to that, are they not?
Mm-hmm.
So here's Israel as slaves. Now, they were in Egypt for about 430 years. In the first few years, they were doing fine. They were under the dominion of Joseph, second command. But then it says finally Joseph died and all his brothers, and the old Pharaoh died, and a new Pharaoh came on the being that did not know Joseph or had no relations with him. And he's the one that made slaves. So we don't know exactly how long. They may have been slaves for about 250 years. but whatever it was, for several generations they were slaves. And so that generation that heard these words from Moses, there was only one thing they've ever done in their entire life.
Be slaves.
And so whatever they do is whatever Pharaoh said. That's all they've ever done. And in their situation, there's nothing they would ever be able to do except that. And they do that till they're dead. That's all. What have they ever done in obedience to God? Nothing. They don't even recognize God. In fact, Moses knew when I go down and say, God sent me, they'll say, which God? There's lots of gods. They don't know who God is. But they do have the leftover, shall we say, the words that came down from the forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that were probably handed down. They have heard of Elohim, Yud He Vav He.
Yeah.
So now when Moses tells them who it was, now they at least know his name, do they not? His title. So what's the very first thing they ever did out of obedience to God?
Put aside a lamb?
Yeah, they went and picked a lamb out of their flock. And then the procedure, they put the lamb in 4-day holdings, and then they slaughtered that lamb, they ate the meat, they put the blood on the door. All that was in obedience to God, wasn't it? Now that's the first thing they've ever done that God said. Pharaoh didn't tell them to do that.
Right.
What
So
Pharaoh
they
told them to
decided
do
to
is,
follow a different leader.
today you are going to make bricks.
Yeah.
What if you don't want to make bricks?
You're going to get punished, or
You're going to make bricks.
You're going to make bricks, yeah.
Today you're going to haul wood for the fire. What are you going to do today?
Haul wood.
What if you don't want to haul wood? You're going to carry water. You're going to clean the barn or something. Whatever you're doing, you do what Pharaoh says. Did Pharaoh tell them to put the blood over the door?
No.
Who told him to put the blood over the door?
The Lord did.
And that's the very first thing, that series of events, picking the lamb, holding all that was all done. The very first thing they've ever done for God, or obedience to God. They've already done their last chore for Pharaoh. Now, Pharaoh doesn't know this, and they don't know it. They will never make one more brick or carry one more stick of firewood. Not one thing ever again for Pharaoh. And this is the first thing they've ever done for God, or an obedience to God. Why did they do something now in obedience to God and disobey or reject anything from Pharaoh?
They got a new master.
It's true, but what have they got new that they never had before? The Lord said to Nicodemus, you gotta have,
they've been born again?
you gotta have a new life.
Yeah.
Now, as slaves, they cannot obey God. They must obey Pharaoh, isn't it?
Right.
So now they're not obeying Pharaoh, they're obeying God. So what does that tell you?
They got that new life going.
They're not slaves anymore. Pharaoh thinks they're slaves. They think they're slaves. They don't know.
Yeah.
But they just done something a slave could not possibly do. Remember we said it's impossible to be born again, but now they're doing something that you have to be born again to do. They're doing it. They're obeying God. They're not obeying their slave master because they no longer are slaves. They still are in. By the way, where were they when they ate that lamb?
In Pharaoh's quarters?
Well, they were in a little shack that slaves live in, didn't they?
Yeah.
And who owned that shack?
Pharaoh did.
So they're in Pharaoh's place. They're in Egypt. Who owns Egypt?
Pharaoh does.
They're in Egypt's land, in Pharaoh's land. But now they're not occupants, or they're not, shall we say, members of that society. They're not slaves. They are occupiers because they're there. But that's not their home anymore. They are not slaves. They're in a slave shack. But what's going to happen with that shack? It has to do with that little house that they're in. What's going to happen?
Okay. It's going to be abandoned.
Yeah.
Well, it's got that.
Before it's abandoned, though, something has to happen.
Well, the blood on the door.
They're going to put the blood on the door. They do that, but now what's going to happen in that shack? They've done that. And why did they put the blood on the door?
In obedience to God.
Because God told them to, and now they're doing what he said. If Pharaoh told them to put the blood on the door, which he did not, but they wouldn't have to do it because they're not his slaves anymore. But God said put the blood on the door, okay, so they do it. Now what happens then? They put the blood on the door.
They had their Passover feast?
Yeah, but that's all part of putting the blood on the door.
Okay.
That's dealing with the lamb, what you do it. But what happens about the shack, the house?
They'll walk through it for the last time.
What's going on that night that's called Passover? Not a very good name for it, but it's what it's called.
Yeah. Well, the last of the plagues was that all the firstborns were going to die, except unless they had the protection of God.
By what means are they going to die?
By the hand of the one that was put in charge of killing.
So what do we call him?
Death angel.
The death angel. Now God is not the death angel.
Right.
God's the Savior. Instead, I haven't come to destroy, I've come to seek and save what's lost. He's the Savior. The death angel is not a Savior, is he?
No.
But is there something evil about the death angel?
No. He was doing
He's not Satan either. He's a servant of God, is he not?
Right.
But he's doing what he's been sent to do. Is he sent to destroy the Lord's people?
If they don't have the Lord's protection, and they're the firstborn, but that's not what their purpose was. His purpose was.
The plagues were against the false gods of Egypt.
Right.
All right, so he's sent to destroy what was keeping the Egyptians in bondage, and through them keeping Israel in bondage. So here comes the death angel. Now, the reason I said Passover is not the right word is because it's not the right word. The Hebrew word is Pesach.
Yeah.
And Pesach means to stand guard or to protect or to take care of. So God says, I will see the blood on the door. When I see the blood on the door, now the way it's interpreted in English is I will pass over to you. If an airplane flies over there, passes over, what effect does that have on you? Doesn't do a thing to you. It just goes over, and if that's all Passover means, the Lord's going to go flying across Egypt. It won't have an effect. It's not what it means. It means I'm going to stand at your door as a guard. Now, if a guard is standing at your door, does that have an effect on you?
Yeah.
How does it affect you?
Well, if he's protecting me, I'm protected.
Yeah, it keeps you safe from whatever's coming. So here comes something called the death angel. What do you think the death angel looked like? If you want to draw a picture, what would you make it look like?
Bigger than the houses.
Yeah. Actually,
just frightening.
It would be pure imagination try to describe.
Yeah, need too much.
Angels are not, they don't have bodies like humans. You couldn't draw a picture of an angel very well.
Every time angels are mentioned, there's something about fear.
Yeah.
And hey, don't fear. Don't
it
be
says
afraid.
that angels are ministering spirits.
Yeah.
What does minister mean?
Helpers.
Well, it could just mean servants. Minister serves.
Yeah.
In fact, church meetings are called services, aren't they?
Yeah.
Why do they call them a service?
I don't know.
They call it because somebody's supposed to be serving you something there.
Yeah.
You serve a dinner, what are you doing?
Somebody's serving food.
You're handing somebody food to eat, aren't you?
Yeah.
Or if you're a servant and your job is to sweep the house out, how do you serve?
By sweeping.
Yeah. So a servant just does a job that needs to be done, right?
Right. Whatever the job is, that's what a servant does.
But it says they're ministering spirits. So what does a spirit look like?
Well, it doesn't have physical form.
You can't make a picture of a spirit, can you?
Right.
Does that mean it's not real?
No, not at all.
But in our human view of everything, we think if we can't see it and feel it, it isn't real. That's pretty much what Thomas said about Yeshua. When if I can't see and feel the wounds, I won't believe.
Right.
But thankfully, he got over that. But a ministering spirit cannot be seen. But that doesn't mean it has no power. When that death angel came, how much power did it have?
Power. It had the power of over life, enough to kill. So he was powerful. All the power of God behind him.
Yeah. When Pharaoh said, "Who's God that I shall obey him?" God said, "I'm going to raise you up because I want to show my power to my people." So the death angel came. The power of God came on. The same power that created the heavens and the earth was backing that death angel. Is there anything in Egypt that can hold him back?
Nope.
So he comes to every house in Egypt, from the palace of the Pharaoh down to the last slave's shack, right? If you had been a slave there and you had a shack, he would come to your door too. And his mission is, whoever in there is the firstborn, you kill him. Everything. Not only of people, but of the animals. You got a flock of sheep, firstborn of them dies. Everything. And there's nothing that could stop it, is there?
No.
But the Lord says, when I see the blood, I will stand guard over your house or at your door. That's really what the word that's translated Passover means. It's too bad. I'm not going to just go zooming by like an airplane flying. I'm going to stand at your door. The word Pesach really means to stand. I'm going to stand at your door. So here comes the death angel. His mission is to kill, and he is going to do it. Except one thing. He gets to your door, what does he see?
If he sees the Lord standing there, he's going to skip it.
He says, I can't go in there. If he tried to go in, what would he be up against?
Be up against the Lord.
Yeah, no chance. The minute he sees the Lord, he would back away and move on to the next place, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
So the word Pesach really means to stand, not to pass over. Why did they stick that word Passover on it? Everybody in the whole world calls it Passover. All the Jews do. Why would they change the name from standing or standing guard, protecting, to passing over?
Because there's power in words. And
well, what made him want to change that?
the only thing is that Satan he gets in there and changes people's mind just by a little.
Would you say the
nuance.
same thing that made Pharaoh say, "Who's God that I should obey him"?
Say again?
The same force that made Pharaoh say, "Who is God that I should obey him?"
Right.
The same force said, "Let's change the word stand over your house as a guard. We'll just make it Passover." And the whole world has bought the idea. There are some Messianic Jews who sleep through that. They don't call it that anymore. The proper word is Pesach, and that means to stand or to guard or protect. So when the Lord says, when the death angel comes to the house of the one who has the blood of the Lord, I will stand at that door protecting that house. So how much effect will the death angel have there? Okay. Now you're not saved by the blood. It's not the blood that saved you. What saved you?
The Lord's presence.
Yeah. But the blood was your testimony that I agree with God. The blood was your faith. The testimony of your faith. Why'd you put it there? Because you agreed with God. Mm-hmm. There's nothing in the blood that saved you from the death angel. The death angel does not regard the blood. The death angel only looks for one thing, the firstborn in the house. That's what he's going for. And it's not the blood that turns the death angel away. It's the presence of God standing guard. If we can understand it, we'll get a better concept of what Passover is really about, don't you think? And so anyway,
God's not the killer.
Yes. So then the Lord said to the Israelites, "This will be the beginning of months for you." How did the Israelites keep track of time?
Well, it starts with that first Pesach.
And how do they keep track of it?
I don't know what you're getting at. Like by the moon phases and months that start with that one.
Well, in the Western world, we use what was called a solar calendar.
Oh, okay, so that they use a moon calendar.
Lunar calendar.
Lunar calendar, yeah.
The solar calendar has to do with revolutions of Earth around the sun. Every revolution, 1 year. But their time is calculated by lunar months or months. So everything is what month it is, isn't it?
Right. New
And
moon.
so,
do they start at the new moon or the full moon?
well, new moon is the beginning of the month. Full moon is the middle of the month,
Okay.
15th, because that's when it's at its brightest. All the feast days always start on full moon, when the light is the brightest. New moon is when it's the darkest. You can't see the moon.
Sure, there's symbolism there.
Of course there is. So here's their lunar months, and the Lord says, now they're going to, once they've put the blood on the door, they're going to eat that lamb. And it cannot be, how do they say, it has to be roasted over fire. Why would they roast it over fire?
Why?
Why? That's what they do.
I don't know why.
Well, what is that lamb that was sacrificed for their freedom? It's a picture.
It's a picture of the Lord,
All right.
the Lamb of God.
Yeah. So the fire pictures the consuming fire of the Lord is consuming the evil that was holding them bondage. Is that right?
Yeah.
So by roasting the lamb, it pictures the Lord consuming sin over as his sacrifice. So anyway, they ate the lamb, and what they look like if you were there and you saw this bunch of family eating that lamb, what do they look like?
Well, they're fully dressed and ready to walk.
Got their shoes on their feet, right? They got their staff in their hand.
Yeah.
They got their whatever they're going to have, because this is a very hasty thing. You don't just stand around chatting and talk and enjoy the meal. You just gorge it down as fast as you can eat, because as soon as you're done, we are out of here.
Yeah.
All right, so now they've come to the end of their meal, and they've eaten as hard as they could eat. They're really in a hurry. Why are they in a hurry?
Well, they're in a hurry because they're leaving Egypt.
Yeah. You know, when the Lord was doing his Pesach dinner, Seder dinner, just before his arrest, and his disciples were there with him, and Judas was there, and after Judas dipped his matzah in the bread, in the stuff with the Lord told him, what you're going to do quickly. Now the Lord knew what Judas was going to do.
Yeah.
What was he going to do?
He's gonna give away Jesus' coordinates, basically selling to, he was going to sell him out, I guess the phrase goes, but he was betraying him.
Yeah, and he was going to go lead the high priest and the soldiers to where the Lord was camping on the Mount of Olives, so that that would begin the process of going through the death, burial, and resurrection of the Lord, wouldn't it? So the Lord said, what you're going to do it quick.
Yeah.
Hurry up, get it done. I want to get this job done. When you're in a hurry, when you really want to get something done, you get at it. You work hard at it because you want to be done with it. It's not an easy job. It's not a pleasant job. In fact, it's a horrible job what the Lord is doing. But he's eager to get at it, and I want to get it done. So hurry up. I'm ready to do it, and I want to get it done now. So hurry up. So when they ate the lamb at their Seder, the the Lord said, you eat it in haste. It is the Pesach. And then as soon as they're done eating, just the minute they're done, it's out the door. Whose door did they go through when they went out?
Pharaoh's door.
They went through Pharaoh's door. Will they ever go back in there again?
No, never.
Now, Pharaoh doesn't know that. He expects them to report for work tomorrow
That's
morning.
right. That's right.
How many of them will be ready to go to work tomorrow morning?
None of them.
Zero. Pharaoh doesn't know that. They've gone out through his door, and they will never go back there again, ever. That's done with.
That's right.
So when you leave this slave situation, which we call the Adamic life, are you ever going to go back to it again?
No.
Why not?
Because that's slavery.
And that's your old life.
That's the old one.
We're talking about a new life, aren't we?
Yeah.
The impossible one you cannot possibly do, but you're going to do it anyway.
That's right.
So now they go down to the Red Sea, and the Lord says to them, this is the beginning of months for you. This is the first day of the first month of the calendar year. So what do we call that first day of your new life?
The new beginning.
Well, what do we call the day?
Pesach?
What's the first day of your life called?
Oh, birthday.
This is the day you were born.
Mm-hmm.
Your new beginning.
Yeah.
Your new birth. Now, they were already born in Egypt, and they were slaves. Everybody in the world was born and they were slaves to sin. The new birth makes you God's people. Now, that's not a replacement. You're not replacing one with another. You're taking the very one that you were and making it new again. You know, what is this idea called replacement theology?
What's it do?
Yeah.
Like in relation to that?
Well, what's it about? What is the replacement theology? You can explain to somebody who never heard of what's replacement theology.
It's the idea that that the Lord had a covenant with Israel, and He replaced Israel with a new spiritual family, and rejected Israel.
So your old car was in such bad shape there was no way we could fix it. We just built you a replica.
Yeah.
That's replacement theology, isn't it?
Yeah.
Israel was so bad that God decided to throw them in the trash, and He's just going to build a new one.
Right.
So now here's your new life. That's not salvation, is it? What got saved? If you threw your old car out in the weeds and built a replica, what did you do to save your old one? That's not salvation. The Apostle Paul wrote, all Israel will be saved.
Yeah.
Do you save them by throwing them in the trash
No.
and replacing them with a different one?
Throw them by saving them in the Savior.
You save them, the ones who were the ones that needed to be saved. They are the ones who are saved.
Yeah.
When Zechariah wrote his prophecy, he talked about they will look on the one that they pierced, and they'll mourn for him. A spirit of supplication will come on them. And it comes out of a place that says, there they'll be called children of the living God. So what does, when it says they will look on the one they pierced, who was it that pierced the Lord? When it says they, is it talking about people who live in Israel today?
No. The ones that were there.
It's going right back to when it happened, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
How can the ones that live today think about something that happened 2,000 years ago and say, there's the one we pierced? Who is we? They said
collective Israel.
They said that's the one that we pierced.
Yeah.
So they're saying we can't say it was our ancestors 2,000 years ago who did it.
Right.
It's us who did it, all of us, and we have to say, how about us over here? Are we involved?
Yeah.
So when he says, then the spirit of supplication will come on those same people that say that, and they will mourn for him as for an only son, and they're gonna weep over him, and salvation will come. Is he talking about replacing them with a new group?
No.
So the concept of replacement theology, why does anybody want to believe that?
Because everybody wants to be better than other people.
Where did they get the inspiration to believe a thing like that?
The inspiration?
Yeah. Where did Pharaoh get the idea to say, "Who is God that I should obey him?"
It's the pride of the flesh.
It's
That's
the same
human
old
nature.
evil spirit that influences people to go contrary to God.
Yeah.
Why did Adam and Eve partake of the fruit they were told not to?
They wanted to
Well, why?
be God.
What inspired them to even do such a thing?
It's the idea that you can be God.
Where'd he get that idea from?
The flesh.
Mm-mm.
The human nature.
No, they got it from the satanic power,
okay,
didn't they?
yeah.
He came and said, "Why don't you be like God? You don't want him telling you what to do."
Right.
The lie came from the enemy. He is the
Yeah.
father of lies, isn't he?
Father of lies.
So if you're believing a lie, where does lies come from? They all come
Father
from the enemy.
of lies, yeah.
That doesn't mean people say the devil made me do it. The devil can't make anybody do anything. All he can do is suggest an idea. If you're a salesman, you want a person to buy your product, can you make them buy it?
No.
All you can do is make it so attractive
Make
to
your
them
sales pitch.
that they want to buy it. And
Yeah.
you make it attractive to them.
Yeah.
That's what Satan does. He makes lies look good. And when the lie looks good, then what do people do?
They buy the lie.
Exactly. So you can't say the devil made me do it. You did it because that's what you want to do. But the devil may have brought up the idea. So anyway, well, here's Israel now. They've had a new beginning of months. That's their birthday. All right. Where does it say this will be the beginning of months for you? If you were looking it up in the book, where would you find that? In Exodus. Exodus means exit, right?
Right.
You're leaving. Has Nicodemus ever read that before?
Yes.
Has he ever taught it to people?
Yeah.
Now, noon as a letter means fish
Yeah.
or spawning, or it can mean new life or new beginnings. If you asked Nicodemus back then, what does noon mean, what would he say?
He would say all those probably.
No, he would not.
Except for new life.
He'd say it means fish or
Yeah.
spawning.
Yeah.
The Lord said, "You're a master of Israel." A master means you're a school teacher, and you're a master teacher. You're not a
He's not
a beginner. You're a veteran of it. You know it, and you don't know this. What is it he didn't know? He knew that noon meant fish, but what did he not know?
He didn't know how it tied into the Exodus story and the new beginning.
He didn't know it meant new beginning, did he?
Right.
And he couldn't. That concept had never entered his mind.
Right.
So he knew all about the Tanakh except what it means. And
Yeah.
so look at 1 Corinthians or 2 Corinthians, that is 4:4. Why didn't Nicodemus get it? 2 Corinthians 4:4.
2 Corinthians 4:4. In their case, the God of this age has blinded the minds of the unbelievers so that they cannot see the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God.
So why didn't Nicodemus understand about being born again?
His eyes was blinded.
Yeah. Now the wonderful thing about this is that the Lord never walked away from a blind man, did he?
Right.
Did the Lord know that Nicodemus had been blinded?
Yeah.
Now, when he said you have to be born again or else, Nicodemus said, how can that possibly be? The Lord said, with man it is impossible, but with God all things are possible. So, did he reprimand Nicodemus for questioning that?
No, he pointed them to the way that would get him out of that
Why?
misunderstanding, because he pointed straight to God,
Why did he do it?
because he loved him.
That's right. And he treats him as a loving father.
Yeah.
I'm not here to beat you down because you don't get it. I'm here to instruct you so you will get it.
Yeah.
Did Nicodemus get it?
Not quite yet.
Did he get it?
Eventually, yeah.
Well, we all get everything eventually. But the question was, did he get it? The answer is either yes or no.
Yeah, he got it.
How do you know that? Can you prove it?
Well, he was with Yeshua later, wasn't he?
Well, yeah, but not the way I think you're going with that. What would prove to anybody that had an ear to hear that Nicodemus got the point?
I don't know.
Well, let's go back. What time of day was it when he first met Yeshua?
At night?
Midnight or late night, right? Why at night?
Because he was hiding something.
What was he hiding?
He was hiding that he was going to Yeshua.
Why do you want to hide that?
Because it was controversial. His identity was controversial amongst the guys that Nicodemus ran with.
Okay. He didn't want them to know that he was meeting Yeshua, right?
Right.
How badly did he not want that to be known?
Well,
what if it was found out? What would they do?
Well, they would jeopardize his life and career.
What do you mean by jeopardize?
They would turn questioning on him, saying, "What are you doing? Thought you were one of
They
us."
would do a whole lot worse than that. The high priest had issued an order that anyone who recognized Yeshua as the Messiah was to be expelled from the synagogue.
From the synagogue, yeah.
So what does that mean, to be expelled from the synagogue?
You cut off from life and all social connections.
If the Church of Christ boots you out, can you go on living?
Yeah.
Will that be the end of your experience?
No.
You just do something else.
Yeah.
But if you got kicked out of the synagogue as a Pharisee, you're a dead man.
Yeah, you'd be out there to the wolves.
You will not be able to buy or sell. You will not be able to do business. You will not be able to get any followers. Everyone will be turned against you.
Yeah.
You'll become a wandering beggar until you die.
Yeah.
There will be no hope for you or your family or anybody. I mean, it was extremely serious to get kicked out of the synagogue.
His position.
And the priest had sent out an order. Anyone who recognized Yeshua is to be expelled from the synagogue. And they meant it. And do you think they did expel anybody?
Yeah, they did.
Probably expelled a lot of them. A lot of those beggars that we read up may have been.
Look at Saul.
Yeah.
What he did.
So now here, they tried desperately to kill him, didn't they? Many times. They killed a lot of the others.
Well, Saul's job was to kill a bunch of people, so.
Yeah, that's right.
He was the prosecutor.
And then he eventually faced the same threat himself.
Yeah.
But, so Nicodemus was very much fearful. He had a reason to be afraid, did he not?
Yeah.
Now, he did come at night. Hopefully at night no one would know that he came, but it's always possible someone could even notice that he went to Yeshua. So was the risk still there?
Yeah.
Even though he took precaution to come at night.
Yeah.
What if someone saw him and found out that he'd gone? That would make it even worse, wouldn't it? Because not only is he going to, but he's hiding it from us other Pharisees. So it would multiply the danger, wouldn't he?
Yeah, it would.
But was Nicodemus willing to take that risk?
Yeah, he had to take a risk.
Yeah, he took it. Why did he take it?
Because he was pursuing the truth.
I want to know the truth, and it's more important to me than my own life. All right? Lord says, if you seek me, you will find me, didn't it?
Right.
And it was Nicodemus seeking the Lord.
Yeah.
Okay, now the next time we read about Nicodemus is after the death of the Lord, at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the day of the atoning sacrifice. What did Nicodemus do?
He helped prepare Jesus' body for burial.
Well, yeah, that's true, but he did something that was the direct result of the rescue from fear.
He came out in the day. Out there
doing what? What did he do during the 3 o'clock or so in the afternoon? What did Nicodemus do? right then.
Came out as a believer, I suppose. He was born again.
What did he do? What did he do? If you were there, you'd see him doing something. What was it?
He helped Joseph to negotiate for one.
Negotiate with who?
Pilate.
Yeah. He went to Pilate, who was the federal government of Rome, is he not?
Yeah.
That's the most powerful force in operation on the world at that time.
Yeah.
It? He went straight to the world government, the Romans, with a request to get the body of Yeshua so that he could give it an honorable burial. Is that right?
Right.
Now, not only was he not afraid of the Pharisees, not even afraid of the federal government.
He wasn't afraid
The Romans,
of anything anymore.
What did the Romans do for anybody they don't like?
Kill him.
They crucify him.
Yeah.
By Nicodemus going to, and Joseph going to Pontius Pilate, were they risking crucifixion?
Yeah.
If they went to Pontius Pilate, who had just finished in crucifying Yeshua, and said, "No, we want to honor the one that you killed," dare talk to the federal government like that?
Yeah.
They're really sticking their finger right in Pontius Pilate's eye and said, "You're the one that killed him. Now we want to honor him." They were very close to being crucified themselves, don't you think?
Yeah.
At least that would be the appearance. But why'd they do it?
Because
What happened to the fear?
it was dispelled.
What throws out fear?
Perfect love.
Does Nicodemus and Joseph have perfect love?
Yeah, they do.
It wasn't their perfect love, though, that casts out the fear.
Right.
Whose perfect love throws out the fear?
God's.
Yeah, when God throws out the fear, could then that one man who threw the fear out of him and turn around and not be one of his people? Makes no sense.
No.
So now he goes and gives the body of honorable burial. And by the way, did he become a replacement theologian and join the Christians? Was Nicodemus a Christian?
No.
What was he?
He was born again Jew.
And he's as Jewish as you can possibly be, isn't he?
Yeah.
What happened to the procedure that he and Nicodemus, or he and Joseph went through to prove that he was still a Jew?
Say what?
What did they do, Joseph and Nicodemus, to prove they were still Jews, even though they were honoring Yeshua?
Well, because the burial customs they were following were Jewish.
They were following the customs of the Torah, weren't they?
Yeah.
To properly handle the burial. Now,
And timely.
because of the time of day, now, remember, it says he died at 3 o'clock in the afternoon at the 9th hour, which would be approximately 3 o'clock. And in those days, the sun would go down approximately 6 o'clock. So they had 3 hours to get the. They can't handle a dead body after sundown. Why not?
Because it's Sabbath.
It's Sabbath. If they did that, it'd be in violation of Sabbath. Does that matter to them?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so they got 3 hours. He dies. They have to go first. They have to go to the federal government. Now, do you think that Pontius Pilate's office was right across the road from where the crucifixion was?
No.
He was cleared down
Most
in
certainly
Jerusalem
not.
someplace.
Yeah.
And this
He was at a high palace in
sacrifice
Jerusalem.
was outside the city wall, right?
It's-
All right. So now he goes to where where Pontius Pilate is ruling, to his office. I don't know how far it was. Let's say it was halfway across Jerusalem. A 1 hour walk.
Yeah. So
Now, what time is it now?
He was on a crunch. Well, it's 4:30.
It's 4 o'clock at least.
Yeah.
Now Pontius Pilate isn't just sitting there waiting for them to show up. He's a busy ruler, isn't he?
Yeah.
They got to get permission to see Pontius Pilate.
Yeah.
You ever tried to get permission to get into a government office? How long does it take to do that?
It's bureaucratic tape.
But in those days, somehow they managed to do it. So give them, what, 30 minutes? Now what time is it now?
4:30.
4:30 at least. All right. They want to get permission to properly treat the body. So they got to talk to Pontius Pilate for a bit.
Yeah.
He sends a soldier out there because nobody dies that quick on a crucifixion. Some of them lived as long as 2 weeks. They died of shock and exposure, horrible pain and suffering. But the word came back that he had died, so a soldier is sent to spear him to make sure he really is dead. Then the answer has to come back to Pontius Pilate. Yep, he's dead, all right. Pontius Pilate can't hardly believe it, but he's got the word from a soldier. So he tells Nicodemus and Joseph, okay, he's yours. Now that's a hike back out to wherever the crucifixion was. How do you get a crucified body down off of a cross? Are they carpenters?
Say what?
Are they carpenters? Nicodemus,
No.
do they have any tools?
I doubt it.
How do you get a crucified body off of a cross? You just rip it off, or what do you do?
You gotta take that nail off.
How do you get it? How do you get it out?
Crowbar.
Do they have crowbar? You think Nicodemus carried crowbars around with him? I know how they got it down.
How's that?
The soldiers got it. Pontius Pilate told the soldiers, give him the body.
Yeah.
So the soldiers had the tools. They got it off.
Yeah.
And they gave them then to Nicodemus and Joseph. Now, what time is it now?
It's pushing 6.
It's 15 minutes to 6.
Yeah,
Right?
5:45.
Now, the tomb was just down a ways from the hill called Golgotha, with the place of the skull. And by the way, the cross was not up on the hill. The cross was at the bottom of the hill. That was where a major main crossroads, the roads from I think it was from the Jaffa road comes up through there, and then maybe the Damascus road. Anyway, it's a major crossroad.
Is it in the south?
Yeah,
Southwest?
I think it's in the northwest of
Okay.
Jerusalem. And it's nowadays, of course, Jerusalem is a big city, but in those days it was outside the wall of the old city. Nowadays, right there where they did it is a big, massive central bus station. There's buses going right and left, all very busy, but in those days it would have been a major road for people to travel on. And the Romans wanted to make these crucifixions very public. Why?
To be an example.
Be an example.
Don't mess with the
To
Romans.
promote fear with the people, right?
Yeah.
You disobey us, here's what happened to you. So it was done right next to a very busy road where everybody in the world would see it. And it does say that people stop and gloat over that, didn't they? So it was a busy place. So anyway, but it's only from about here to that Fred Meyer sign from the Golgotha to where this tomb is. It's just 100 yards or less.
Huh.
So in those days, can you picture now, it's 15 minutes till sundown. And they said they brought 75 pounds of spices for the proper burial. What do you do with 75 pounds of spice? You got 15 minutes to get the job done.
Sprinkle them about and go.
Throw it on, and they wrap the body in a linen cloth and put him in the tomb, and the sun went down.
Yeah.
Why'd they rush and run and get all that done? You know,
So they wouldn't be in breaking Sabbath.
why did that matter to them?
Because they were good Jews.
They're good Jews, and they want to obey the Torah.
That's right.
When did they ever stop being Jews?
They didn't.
They didn't. They're continuing. So, you know, sadly, a lot of what we call Christianity thinks that you can't be a Christian and be a Jew.
Right.
And the Jews think you can't be a Jew and be a Christian because neither one of them
Right.
understands what it's about, do they?
That's right.
It has to do with obeying God. And when you think the Torah has been made obsolete, and the Lord said, I have not come to destroy the law. I've come to show you how it's fulfilled. I've come to be the answer to all the questions. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
And to say it's obsolete, say then the Lord himself is obsolete, because he said, I've come here to be what that was talking about.
Yeah.
So if you're going to make the Torah obsolete, you might as well make the Lord obsolete as well, huh? What happens to everything when you do that?
Nothing's any
It can't
good
be
anymore.
obsolete. And
You know, something I never thought about until today
Yeah.
was that Nicodemus and them, if they were to understand that the Torah was nailed to the cross, they wouldn't have had to worry about disrupting the Sabbath by going in after sundown.
Well, the important matter is,
Yeah, that's not important because
I don't
anybody
think,
who would
for
defend
example,
that be
there's 613 commandments in the Torah. Do you think there's anybody in the face of the earth that obeys 613 commands?
no.
And does that mean they're condemned then?
Well, depends on who you're asking.
Well, remember,
Because the book of James says if you disobey one, you disobey them all.
all right,
So the question is, what hope do you have if you do?
that's right. So, remember there was someone who came, a Pharisee came to the Lord and said, what's the most important command in the Torah? What's his answer?
Love God, love your neighbor.
No, he didn't say that. He said, love God,
Yeah, okay.
period. And the Pharisee would say, I do that.
Right.
So what's your problem? But then he sneaked in the second one, right? He said the second one is equal to it.
Yeah.
And what is that one?
Love your neighbor.
All right. So if one thing is equal to the other, then which is the most important?
Equally.
They're equal. Can you do one without doing the other?
No.
Can you love God and not love your neighbor? Can you love your neighbor and not love God?
No.
But he said, if you do these two things, you have fulfilled the Torah. So are you required to love God and love your neighbor?
Yes.
But you're not in the Jewish world, you're the Christian. Are you required to obey the law? The answer is yes. Which part of the law are you required to obey?
All of it.
All of it. But there's 613 commands. Have you read all 613 commands?
Yeah.
How do you know whether you're obeying them or not? Are you obeying them?
Through Yeshua, yeah.
He says, if you love God and love your neighbor, you have fulfilled the law.
Yeah.
Are you required to obey the law?
Yeah.
How do you do it?
How loving God, loving your neighbor.
If you do that, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you don't do that, if you don't love God and don't love your neighbor, but you obey 614 or 12 laws, how are you doing? You broke one, you're guilty of all.
Yeah.
So what is the one that you must not break?
Love God.
And love your neighbor.
Love your neighbor.
The two are equal, though.
Yeah.
They're like a coin. It has two sides of a coin, heads and tails. If you say, I need a quarter, okay, here's a quarter. Do you care which side you pick up, heads or tails? Does that matter?
No.
Why not?
It's all part of the same
Because it's
cord.
part of the same thing.
Yeah.
So the law that says it's the great one is love God, love your neighbor. It's the same coin, both sides, just which side you're looking at.
Yeah.
So when you pick it up, you love God and love your neighbor. The Lord said, if you do these things, this fulfills the law. Now, does that mean it's okay to not bother with the Sabbath? Or it's okay to not worry about whether or not you should commit adultery?
Well, you know that's God's will for that to happen. You know, to obey those.
Well, if you love God and you love your neighbor, what are you going to do about adultery?
Well, you can't.
You can't, because
You can't.
how can you love your neighbor and love God and go into that?
Right.
So loving God and loving your neighbor kind of covers it all, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And so when Joseph and Nicodemus took extreme care to make sure that everything they could do got done before Sabbath, do you think they were loving God and loving the neighbor?
Yeah.
Why do you think that?
Because they wanted to please God. So
It mattered to them what
Yeah.
God said, didn't it?
yeah, they took God seriously.
Yeah. So, when people say, well, For example, the Lord said you have to appear at Jerusalem 3 times a year for a feast.
Yeah.
You going to go to Jerusalem 3 times this year?
No.
Well, then you're in violation.
Right.
So no Gentile who never does go to Jerusalem can ever be saved, right?
Well,
You got to go to Jerusalem. It says that in the Torah.
gotta go to Jerusalem, yeah.
So what are you going to do?
Well, gotta go to Jerusalem.
Well, I've been there once, but I haven't gone 3 times, and I probably won't go again, likely, but
Yeah.
I'd be happy to. But you think about it, if he said loving God and love your neighbor fulfills it, are you still required to go to Jerusalem 3 times a year?
Well, you're required to love God and love your neighbor.
So are you required to go to Jerusalem 3 times a year?
I guess not.
So you're not required to obey the Torah. That's because it's obsolete. It doesn't matter anymore. It has no more meaning. It's useless. It's been nailed to the cross, like old Irwin said. What are you going to do about it? The Torah says you can't light a fire on you can't light a fire on the Sabbath. You must cease from all ordinary work on the Sabbath. What day is the Sabbath anyway? Saturday? That's the day dedicated to the Saturn god.
Yeah, yeah.
What day is Sabbath?
Well,
The Lord said in Genesis, on the 7th day, God rested from all his works, and he sanctified the day, calling it today.
yeah.
So what day is Sabbath?
Today?
Today. What if the calendar says it's Thursday?
It's still today.
Still today. Are you required to love God and love your neighbor on Sabbath?
Yeah.
What if the calendar says it's Thursday?
It's
Not
today.
Sabbath. Not Sabbath, according to the solar calendar, guys. You know, this obeying God and loving God, loving your neighbor covers a lot of stuff, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
Now, of course, if you went to Israel, where they really make a thing out of Sabbath, all the stores are closed on Sabbath. You want to buy some groceries, too bad the grocery store's closed. Except there'll be some that are open. Why are they open?
They're going to pay the penalty.
They pay the penalty because they make more money even if they pay the penalty by staying open. So are they loving God and loving the neighbor?
Well, that's a tough one, Jim.
Why is it tough?
Because they're...
Why don't they obey the Sabbath? The Sabbath says shut down. But we make more money if we don't shut down.
Well, they're not... I wouldn't say that they're loving God then. They're loving money.
They're loving themselves, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they have a way of beating around the law. You know, any law can be beaten if you know the tricks, can't it?
Yeah.
Any rule. You can violate any rule and get away with it if you know about it.
Yeah.
But why would you do it? If you really cared, you'd say, well, I just won't do it. Now, so what do we do about Sabbath? What do we just ignore it, or do we say it doesn't apply anymore, or there's no such thing, we don't need to do it?
No, you got to look at it through Jesus, right?
We have to recognize that it's a relationship with God and with what God thinks of everybody. That's what the important thing. You know, the Pharisees, in their legalistic view of everything, they always interpreted everything in a legalistic manner, didn't they?
Yeah.
Here's a blind guy who had been blind, but now he's walking around, and or one guy was lame, and now he's carrying a little rug that he was laying on. And the Pharisee said, he's violating the law. He needs to die. And whoever told him to do it needs to die because they're in violation. So they were worried about whether or not he could pick up a rug and walk somewhere with it on the Sabbath. more than how much did they love the neighbor and love God?
Well, those guys that are doing all that regulation,
Yeah.
yeah, they're not showing a lot of love for either one of them.
So
They're showing love for themselves.
in reality, they got a false god going here, don't they? They got an idol going.
Yeah.
The idol is their religious ritual obedience, isn't it?
Right.
Remember when they dragged some poor woman, the Lord, who had been accused of adultery?
Yeah.
Is there any doubt that she had done it?
No.
Was their crave? What did they want to accomplish in all that? Do they care about her at all?
No.
Do they care about her adultery at all?
No.
What do they want to do here? Why'd they bring him to Yeshua?
They wanted to test him
Why?
because they wanted to make him fall.
If they could prove that he doesn't answer the question properly, we'll prove he's not the Messiah.
Yeah.
And then what will we do with him?
We'll get rid of him.
How do we get rid of him?
Well, they crucified him eventually.
But they couldn't do that because they didn't have the authority. What would they do according to Torah? Yes. Stoning. That was the capital punishment.
Yeah.
Almost every case. In fact, the whole issue with the woman was about stoning, wasn't it?
Right.
They came to him and said, here's a woman who was caught right in a very active adultery. There's no use arguing that she was.
Yeah.
There's no word argument. So they said, okay, here's what the Torah says. This is Moses. Moses wrote the Torah according to them, right?
Right.
What should be done?
She should be stoned.
She should be stoned. The question was, okay, you who think you're the Messiah, what do you say? This is what Moses said. Moses said she should be stoned.
So they're trying
What
to
do you say?
pit him against Moses. Right?
All right, so do they expect him to agree with Moses?
Yes. Or no.
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 He's false, right?
Right.
They don't expect him to agree. But what if he does agree with Moses?
He's going to have a good answer.
Well, if he does, if he agrees with Moses according to them,
Then she's going to get stoned.
then what will they do with him if he agrees with Moses?
Accuse him of being an executioner.
And no mercy, right?
Right.
But they know that the true God is merciful.
Yeah.
How do they know that God is merciful?
Because they read all the Psalms.
Because the very Torah that they teach says that, doesn't it?
That's right.
So they know it.
Yeah.
So if he says stone her, they'll say, then you're not merciful, so therefore you can't be the Messiah.
Yeah.
What if he says don't stone her?
Well, you disagree with Moses, you can't be from God.
So either way, you're wrong. They don't care how he answers.
They thought that they had him.
We've got him. He'll have to answer the question, shall we stone her? We don't care how he answers, he's going to be wrong either way, right?
That's right.
He surprised them. They expected him to either say stone her or don't stone her, didn't he?
Yeah.
But what does he do instead?
He bends down and writes on the ground.
Writes on the ground with something called the finger of God. If you want to look up a very, very interesting article, look up the finger of God.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of that term?
Yeah.
It says God wrote the tablets of stone with Moses, the finger of God.
Yeah.
And the Egyptians, magicians, said this is nothing but the finger of God when they couldn't overcome some of the plagues.
Yeah.
Many times the Lord wrote something. So here down the Lord writes on the ground. And everybody teaches it, says we don't know what he wrote. I think I know what he wrote. But he did write something on the ground. If they were to stone that poor old woman, young woman or whatever she was, it wouldn't be long, there'd be blood flow, wouldn't there?
Right.
Where would the blood flow? Right to where he wrote on the ground.
Right there in the dirt, right?
Yeah, the blood would flow onto him. And if they were to stone her, they wouldn't hit her with the stones very well because their aim would be way off. You know what they'd be aiming at?
Yeshua?
They wanted to stone him so they would miss her, perhaps. It'd sure get him for sure. But he's writing his name on the ground right where the blood would go because he's ready to lay his life down, is he not?
Yeah.
So he writes his name on the ground and he stands up and he says, "Stoner." Now they were hoping he'd say that because that would be in agreement with Moses, right?
Yeah.
Why did they want him to agree with Moses?
So they can accuse him of being harsh.
Unmerciful. Right, so it says stoner. But then he throws in another trick to him.
Yeah.
In the Torah, one of the things in the Torah, and they knew this, is that before stoning can be done, someone has to bear the responsibility for the stoning.
Yeah.
It has to be someone's chosen. That was to prevent mob violence. You can't just go stone anybody you feel like. It has to be done legally.
Mm-hmm.
So someone would have to take the legal responsibility for the stoning. That's part of the Torah. If in the case of an incorrigible son, the father would have to take responsibility. So in this case, he says stoner. But since he was the one that was challenged with the concept, he said, "Okay, I'll choose who's to first stone. The one who has no sin should throw the first stone." All right. Some people say they had a guilty conscience. I don't believe that for 1 second. These are proud Pharisees. What do they think they are anyway?
They think they're the righteous ones.
Yeah. They don't have a guilty conscience. They're proud, vain Pharisees. We are the good guys.
Yeah.
But what was the problem then?
Men of God. The problem was one of the particularities of the law, right?
Yes.
Because, let's see, if they picked up the stones to accuse her, they would say, "I am sinless."
And which would be called
blasphemy.
Which is worse, adultery or blasphemy?
Blasphemy.
Now, they were ready to stone her for adultery.
Yeah.
But what would happen if one was proven to be blasphemous?
They'd have to pick up the stones and throw them in.
All the other priests would be required to stone that guy, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Now it says starting with the oldest one. Why the oldest one?
He probably knew the intricacies of the
He's
battle
been
that they
studying
had
and
just
teaching
lost.
the laws, so he
Yeah.
knows every point. And the minute he heard the Lord say, the first one that says, that has no sin, let him throw. He know if I reach down and pick up a rock, I'd be saying by that action, I'm the one with no sin.
Yeah.
All the others would immediately be required to stone him, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Because that's the Torah, and they've just been talking about Torah. So beginning with the oldest one, he thought about that a second. He just turned around and walked away.
Yeah.
And then the second oldest one thought about it. He walked away. Before long, they all went. Now, so then the Lord, here's this poor woman. By the way, when she'd been dragged, what did she look like when they brought her up there?
She probably barely has any clothes on and looks frightened.
Frightened?
Yeah.
How frightened?
Scared to death.
What does she think's coming?
She thinks she's going to die.
And I don't know if she'd ever seen a stoning before, but can you imagine? It's not a happy place to be. Just somebody throwing rocks at you until you finally die.
Yeah.
It'd be a horrible pain and suffering and screaming and everything else. She thinks that's right up down the street from her.
Yeah.
So she's terribly frightened. But now when she sees these guys all walk away and nothing's happening, the Lord now says to her, he asks her a question. What was the question?
Where are your accusers?
Where's the accuser? And she says,
There are none.
They're gone. And then he said something she never expected. What he just said, stone her, didn't he?
Yeah.
So now what does he say?
He says, well, if you don't have any accusers, you can go.
No, that's not what he said.
He said, go and sin no more.
No. He said, I'm not going to accuse you either.
Right.
But does he know she's guilty?
Yeah.
Does he know that she should be stoned?
Yeah.
Does he know the one with no sin should stone her?
Yeah.
Is he one with no sin? Then why doesn't he stone her himself?
He's got all the sins.
He's got the most sin of anybody in the whole world, doesn't he? Because he took on himself the sins of all the people, including hers. Yeah. He's the least one qualified as stoner of all of them, isn't he?
Right.
And they all left. So how could he then turn around and do what they couldn't do?
Yeah.
Because he's completely disqualified himself from being her condemnation, hasn't he?
Yeah.
So he said, I'm not going to condemn you. In fact, I've done something for you that stoning would never do. I've taken away your sin. Yeah. And I firmly believe that when he wrote on the ground what he was doing, he was signing a contract. When they hand you a contract and a ballpoint pen, what do they expect you to do?
Sign it.
What do you do when you sign it?
You're putting your agreement on it.
Well, what do you write on it?
Your name.
You write your name on it.
Yeah.
I think when he wrote in the dirt, he wrote his name in the dirt because he was saying, this is where the blood will go. So when he died at Golgotha, where did the blood go?
It went to her, went to everybody.
Onto the ground, right?
Yeah.
That's right where she was. And where she'd be lying dead within a few minutes had things gone the way they were. But he said, I've taken your sin on myself, so I can't condemn you. But since I've taken your sin on me, what does that make you?
Without sin.
Without sin. So now he can tell her, go and sin no more.
Yeah.
Now if she's a sinner, if she's a slave to sin, what's use of telling a slave not to make bricks when Pharaoh said make bricks?
There's no use.
So if your old nature says sin, then don't tell a sinner not to sin.
Yeah.
That'd be useless, wouldn't it?
But she was just born again, so she got that godly.
He took her sin on himself, wrote his name in the ground as a signing a contract. And when you sign a contract, what does that do?
It seals it, makes it so.
And who becomes responsible for the contract then?
The one who signed it.
When you wrote your name on it, I have to do what this contract says. And the Torah is the contract that says this is what God has agreed to do. And by signing his name there, he becomes liable to the Torah, does he not?
Yeah.
So what the Torah says, he has written his name at the bottom of it. It's just like signing a contract, isn't it?
Yeah.
And because he's done that, he could say to her, okay, now go and don't do it again because now you don't have to. When you were a slave to sin, you had to sin.
Yeah.
But you're not a slave anymore. Now you have the right to do what's right because you've been made a partaker of the divine nature.
Yeah.
So all of that is in the letter Nun. You notice how Nun looks? It's a vav standing on an upright form on the baseline.
Yeah.
So here you want to read a psalm. And this is, let's see if I can remember where I put this one.
Psalm 119?
It's not 119, it's
112?
maybe it's one, let's see. Maybe it is. Try 105, 112. No, that's not. No, that's the noon sake. That's not it. It's another psalm.
There's a psalm written on the back. Psalm 112. What's the wording?
Let's see. Yeah, 112:4. That's it. Psalm 112, verse 4.
112, verse 4. Light shines in the darkness for the upright. He is gracious, compassionate, and righteous.
Okay. Nun is the upright, but he's standing on the ground.
Oh.
What's on the ground?
What's on the ground?
Yes. See, in that paragraph it says, Nun is a figure representing someone who's upright, but still standing on the ground.
Yeah.
What does that Psalm 112 say?
It says, Light shines in the darkness for the upright. He is gracious, compassionate, and
So
righteous.
what's on the ground?
The Lord.
No. Read it very carefully. Read it again.
Okay. Light shines in the darkness for the upright.
Okay, the darkness is on the ground.
Yeah.
What does darkness represent?
Sin and evil?
Yeah. When the Lord was talking to Nicodemus, he said, here's the indictment that God has against me. Light has shined in the world, but men love darkness rather than light.
Right.
If men love darkness rather than light, then what does God love? Men love darkness rather than light, so what does God love?
God loves light.
Rather than darkness, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it says there, the upright. Read that one more time, 1:12:4.
Light shines in the darkness for the upright.
Okay. Light shines in the darkness.
Yeah.
What do men want
Darkness.
rather than light?
Yeah.
What does God want?
Light rather than dark.
So for the upright, what do we got going there? 1:12.
Light shines in the darkness.
So who's the upright?
Those who are covered in God's light.
All right. The upright love light,
Love light. Yeah.
because
Light
God
lover.
loves light.
Yeah.
But they're standing on the ground. What's on the ground? Darkness.
Yeah.
If you don't believe it, turn on the news. Every day's news is just one miserable thing after another, isn't it?
Yeah.
Murders and wars and the coronavirus and everything else that's evil. But where do we stand? On the earth.
Yeah.
But light shines for the upright. So even though they're on the dark world, what's their experience? They're standing in the dark world, but what about it? 1:12:4.
We're enlightened. It says he is compassionate, gracious, and righteous.
Okay, the upright is standing on the ground. Now, we have become partakers of the divine nature. So the upright, if you're looking at Yeshua himself, what's his nature? Yeshua.
His nature is light.
It's the divine nature, right?
Yeah.
So he stands on the ground. When did he ever stand on the ground? Where was he standing when he was talking to the Pharisees about that woman that he stand?
He's standing on the ground.
Standing on the ground.
Yeah.
And what's going on the ground?
Um.
Every evil thing going, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
The world's filled with it.
Yeah.
You know, in the beginning in Genesis, it says, at the very beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form. So when he first created the earth, it was no definite shape to it. It was just a blob of dirt or something. And it says darkness covered the face of the deep. The indication it was covered with water. And it says the Spirit of God brooded over the water. What does brood mean?
It means hover.
Well,
Hovered and pondered and
yeah. If you're brooding over something, what are you doing?
thinking hard.
You're thinking about it, and you're thinking of everything about it, whether the good stuff and the bad stuff and whatever. But it says darkness covered everything. Now darkness, when the sun goes down and gets dark, that's not evil. That's just the rotation of the earth, right? But there's a parable about darkness. What is it about darkness? What does it mean?
It's well, we just said earlier it's sin and evil.
Okay.
But it also says Lord.
Psalm 23 says, I'm walking through the dark valley,
Yeah.
but I'm not afraid. Is there anything to fear walking in a dark valley?
No.
What's there to fear? Well, there is things to fear. Yes. There's a place where it says haunts of violence fill the dark places of the valley. What's a haunt?
Dark spirit.
Yes, an evil spirit.
Right.
And it's in the dark places of the valley. So if I'm walking through the valley, is there a danger there?
Yeah.
What's the danger?
The danger is the dark spirits.
What do they want to do?
Take you out.
That's right. but I'm not afraid because
you're in the presence of the Lord.
yes, and He has some equipment to handle anything that may go wrong. So I'm safe with all kinds of good things. But darkness represents evil. So it says in Genesis, darkness was over the face of the earth, or over the waters, and the Lord brooded over. He thought about it. He looked at it and considered everything about it. Did He like what He saw?
No.
Because the very next verse says, "Let the light shine out."
Yeah.
Now it doesn't say, "I'm going to create light." God did not create light.
He is light.
He is light. But with the darkness is over everything, then where's the light?
It's in God.
It's within Himself. But He said, "Let the light shine out." So the Lord said, "I am the light of the world." Didn't He say that?
Yeah.
Has the light shined out?
Yeah.
Yes. But there's still dark places. And so there's danger. So when the Lord said, "Let the light shine out," then it went out. So it says now, here's the upright man. What is the upright man doing? 112:4.
The upright is standing in the darkness.
What's it say? Read it.
Light shines in the darkness for the upright.
Okay, the darkness is there. Now Psalm 119:105. You know that one. 119:105.
Thy word is a light to my feet and a lamp to my path.
Yes. All right. Why do you need a lamp to your path?
Because it's dark.
It's dark. But when you have a lamp, what happens to darkness?
You can see.
Well, what does a lamp do for darkness?
It chases it away.
Yeah. How do you get rid of darkness anywhere? You turn on lights, don't you?
Yeah.
You can't just grab a handful of dark air and throw it out. That won't work. The only way to get rid of darkness is through light.
Shine light on it. Yeah.
So, and the upright stands in the darkness, but he's not in the darkness because the lights shine there, right?
Right.
But he's on the ground where darkness is. Now you know what the Sophite letters are. What's the Sophite letters?
It's the final endings.
Yeah, the word Sophite is a Hebrew word. It means conclusion or final. So, if every letter has a meaning to it, and noon is a picture of upright standing on the dark world, is this how it ends up?
Well, no.
How does it end up?
Enlightened.
Yes. So a noon Sophite looks like this, only the upright just keeps on going down below the baseline.
Right.
Straight on down. Like it goes below the baseline.
Yeah.
If you go below the level of earthly evil, where are you going?
Well, they call it hell.
You're going into death anyway, right?
Yeah.
Sheol is translated hell.
Yeah.
Which is become a word that people don't have the slightest idea what it's talking about. But it really means the place of the death.
Yeah.
So when the Lord died, He entered into death, did He not? He went below the baseline.
Yeah.
They have a saying in Israel, before you can go up, you got to go down.
Yeah.
So the Lord did go down, then what did He do?
Came back up again.
How far up did He go?
All the way.
Yeah. So look at Ephesians. This is a lesson on that one. Ephesians, where is it? Ephesians 4:8-10.
Ephesians 4:8-10. For it says, when He ascended on high, He took prisoners into captivity. He gave gifts to people. But what does He ascended mean except that He descended to the lower parts of the earth? The one who descended is also the one who ascended far above all the heavens, that He might fill all things.
Okay, So the Nun Sofit is a picture of the upright one descending below the baseline,
Yeah.
clearing to death. And after he does that, then what does he do?
He ascends
He
back
ascends. And how far up does he go?
all the way to the heavenly realm.
He goes to the throne of God, does he not?
Yeah.
And Romans 6 says, if you're in him, you died with him. So where did you go?
To the depths and to the heights.
depth below the baseline. And it says, if you died with him, you're also resurrected with him. So
Yeah.
where do you go when you're resurrected with him?
To the throne of God.
Yes. So the final form of Nun is a picture of the death and burial and resurrection of the Lord, and yours included, isn't it?
Yeah.
Nun's a pretty powerful word, isn't it?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
It's a letter that gives you the whole gospel in one letter.
That's pretty good.
And now, we read this before, to try it again. Hosea chapter 6, verse 1 through 3. Hosea 6, 1 through 3.
Hosea 6, 1 through 3.
Yeah.
Come, let us return to the Lord, for he has torn us, and he will heal us. He has wounded us, and he will bind up our wounds. He will revive us after 2 days, and on the third day he will raise us up, so we can live in his presence.
Okay. We say he went below the baseline, descended. Now he's ascended. But what does that third verse there say in Hosea?
He will raise us up so we can live
So
in
not
his
only
presence.
him raised, but us also raised, right?
Yeah.
That's Romans 6, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hosea 6 agrees with Romans 6. Why does Hosea agree with Romans?
Because it's the same author.
That's right, exactly. But Romans was written to the Roman church. Hosea was written to Israel.
Yeah.
But isn't Israel been made obsolete?
No.
How about Hosea? You going to make that obsolete too? So,
Let us strive to know the Lord. His appearance is as sure as the dawn. He will
Yes.
come to us like the rain, like the spring showers that water the land.
now the letter Nun has a numerical value of 50. You know,
Oh.
so if they were going to talk about the number 50, they'd say Nun.
Huh.
So
That's,
50 days after the Passover, the Pesach.
It's Pentecost.
Yeah, it's called Pentecost. Pentecost is I think it's a
Greek.
Latin word. It means, or Greek.
Yeah.
It means 50. But the word is Shavuot. That's a celebration. You know what Shavuot is?
No.
That's when they met God at Mount Sinai and got the tablets of stone and so on.
Oh, yeah.
The Torah, they got that at Shavuot. And that's done 50 days after Pesach. So apparently it took them 50 days to go from Egypt to Mount Sinai. Because when they got there, then they met God, and God met them, and that's where they got his decrees, and which the purpose of the Torah was to show them how to live the life that they've been rescued into. They've been rescued from slavery into God, being God's people. You know, when they were in Egypt, their title was slave.
Yeah.
But there's a little song we have, there's a new name written down in glory. You ever heard that one?
No, I don't think so.
That's an old camp song. But the Lord said, I've given you a new name which is above every name. And the name that they have is no longer slave. The name is Israel, which means man of God or prince of God. And so God never referred to them as slaves, even when they're in rebellion, when they disobeyed many times, when they made the golden calf. Did God complain about those miserable slaves?
No.
It says, my people are in trouble.
Yeah.
So over 130 times the Lord refers to his people as sheep.
Yeah.
And the psalm we call the shepherd psalm is about walking in the dark valley. Now, when the shepherd carries a staff, what's the purpose of the staff?
To guide the sheep.
To guide the sheep. Now, typically an old-fashioned picture of a shepherd, the staff always had a hook on the end, right?
The crook, yeah.
What's the purpose of the hook?
To snatch them out of danger.
Yeah. Why would he grab a sheep with that hook? Wouldn't that maybe hurt the sheep?
It might, but it's for the good, for the rescue.
Yeah. His intent is not to injure the sheep. That's not what he wants. Does he want his sheep injured?
No.
But if that's what it requires, he would rather see him injured than killed, wouldn't he?
Right.
And the dark spirits that are in the hidden places, their game is to destroy him. So the hook, and whether he uses the hook or maybe he could use the staff to point the way or to block their way or to prod them a little bit to get them to move or something.
Yeah.
The staff is always for the good of the sheep, right?
Right.
Now he has another thing called the rod.
Rod is for punishing the enemies.
Yeah, for fighting off wolves or predators. And both of them are a comfort to the sheep. Now, sheep, he doesn't use a rod on sheep. How can the rod be a comfort to the sheep?
Because whatever they fear can be beat up by the rod.
Yeah, so he knows the rod is there to protect me, right?
Yeah.
So then here he is that the shepherd is taking these sheep through this dark valley where they would be in terrible danger. If it were not for the shepherd, they'd never make it, would they?
Right.
Says he leads me along the right path. You know, you go out in the wilderness, there'll be paths going every which way. The Bedouins and their camels going here and there and everywhere. How would you know which path to go on?
Well, the shepherd knows the way.
The shepherd would know, but an average sheep wouldn't have a clue, would he?
Right.
So he'd go almost sure down the wrong path. He'd end up someplace he shouldn't be.
Jim, did you ever get that video I sent you about the sheep?
Yes, I did. We're jumping.
Yeah.
I showed that to the mother. That's a funny one.
That's funny, man.
So, anyway, the Torah is like the staff. It's there to show us how to live. It's our teaching ministry. You know, they often interpret the word Torah as law.
Right.
They call it the law. But in truth, the Hebrew word Torah does not mean law. It means instruction or teaching.
Yeah.
And if you think about law, you know, the reason we have to stop there is because that's the law. Right. But what if we don't stop and the cop's sitting right there?
Well,
we're going to be in trouble. So we think of the law as something that puts force down on us and is making us do things whether we want to or not.
Right. And
is punishing us if we do the right thing. But what if it's teaching and someone said, let me show you how to properly make a turn onto a road as your driving instructor? He's not there to punish you. He's there to help you do it right, isn't he?
Right.
So the Torah is there to make your life successful. You want the Torah. How many times the Psalms say, how I love your law, how I just delighted in your decrees. Now he's not saying I love being punished or threatened. What is it that he loves?
Loves that God has reached out and given us some direction.
Yeah, because it's for my good.
Yeah.
So he sees the law. It's sad that they use that word law, but he sees the Torah not as a thing threatening, here's what you have to do or else, anything like that. But he sees it rather as the teaching ministry to show me how to do it right so that I'll have a good life. It's always for my good. And so when the shepherd reaches out with his staff to either push, pull, or prod the sheep, it's always for the sheep's good. And ultimately, what if he did jerk the sheep and it kind of hurt the sheep and the sheep is now suffering some pain? What will the shepherd do?
Help them with their pain.
Yeah, he would anoint my head with oil. Yeah. He would comfort me. He'd do something.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that hurt. I didn't want to hurt you, but you were giving me such a hard time. The only way to get you to do it was this way. But that's not what I want. I don't want you to be hurt. I want you to be joyful and glad and comfortable and safe. And if that's what it takes, okay. So with the comforting words of the shepherd, how's the sheep going to come to feel about the shepherd?
Going to love him.
Yeah, and be glad for his Torah or his shepherd's staff. When he sees that staff and the rod, he says, they make me feel better. They make me comfortable. They take away my fear. They give me a sense of hope. So noon is all of that.
So why then do you still have to go to Jerusalem 3 times a year?
To celebrate those feasts, to point you to who the Lord is. And I'm going to say, yes, you do. You are required to go there.
Yeah.
But how do you get there? Follow the path. How do you know where the path goes?
He's the way.
112. 119, 105. What does it say?
The way lit by the light.
What's the light?
He is the light.
Your word is a light to my path.
Yeah.
So if he is, now the word, the way a lot of people read that, they'll say the Bible is the word.
Right.
I say, yes, the Bible is God's word, but the word of God is not the Bible. What's the word of God?
The word of God is Yeshua.
Yes. So Yeshua is the light that shows me the right path. Where is he? When you're on a path, what are you doing?
You're going somewhere.
You're going somewhere. You don't get on a path because you want to be on the path. Because if where it ends up, that's where you want to go. So if the word, which is Yeshua, is giving you the guidance on the path, and he says we got to go to Jerusalem 3 times a year, where are you going to go?
Go to Jerusalem.
So are you going?
Yeah.
Yes. But in the world, they say, well, you got to get on El Al airliner and pay the ticket, and they'll take you there.
Yeah.
The Lord says, follow the word. He'll take you on the path. So can you, I've said so many times that everything's a parable.
Yeah.
If you take anything as not being a parable, you're going to get awfully twisted.
Yeah.
You're going to have such a hard time. You can't get in your car and start the engine on Sabbath if you take it literally.
Right.
Or you can't walk over and snap on a light on your light switch. If you turn on your bathroom light on Sabbath, that's a violation.
Right.
If you put your shoes on, you have to put your right shoe on first, then your left shoe. But if you put your left shoe on first, then your right shoe, you're in violation.
Yeah.
You think God cares which shoe goes on first?
No.
Then why did he put it in there?
To show us order?
That's right. God is a God of perfect order, and every detail matters to God of your life. But everything is a parable.
Yeah.
And the parable always has a much deeper meaning than the literal sense,
I was listening to you talking to Nathan and that issue. I didn't hear everything that laid out the case, but just kind of what I put together was that the married couple is a parable of Christ and the church.
That's right.
And what they're demonstrating right now is that there's division.
Division right away.
Right. And so you can't really point to the parable's not complete if the parable's messed up,
And both of them were talking about their ministry.
Yeah, exactly.
Our ministry requires us to be divided. Yeah. Does that make any sense?
No.
And if the enemy is the one who wants to divide you, and my guess is their ministry will suffer if they continue that way.
I agree. And before Alicia and I went to Ukraine, we had a guy who basically was the main one who initiated everything. He was God's hand to get us there.
Yeah.
And his name was Tim. And Tim told us, he said, whatever you do in the mission field, whatever kind of work you're doing, he said, if you haven't got a good relationship with one another, it doesn't even matter.
Yeah. That's right. And, this so-called ministry, we refer to religious staff members as ministers.
Right.
What does minister mean?
Well, we talked about it earlier. Somebody that helps do the job that needs to be done.
Yeah, it's to serve. A minister is a servant, isn't he?
Yeah.
his concept is to, or his whole idea of the word is to do something for someone. Is not to do something to someone or make them do something. Is to literally bow down and give them a gift. It's just like the word bless. Bless means to bow down and present a gift.
Yeah.
So if we call our ministry, we want God to bless our ministry. We want God to bow down and give us something to make our ministry able to bow down and give something to somebody else, don't we?
Yeah.
But if we're going to throw a wrench in the works right in the middle of it all, what's going to happen?
It's going to
And
come to a halt.
yeah. And you know, the very concept, both of them said, this one guy said he's a paid staff member.
Yeah.
That's his ministry. And she's got some kind of ministry going there, wherever she is. So therefore, they have to be separate. That, it just, to me, I think it just strikes for disagreement from then on. They're going to have one problem after another. My guess was they might not even have a very good reason to get married.
Yeah.
They're talking about doing it for a wedding, but I think they better rethink their whole concept. And I thought it was good that Nathan and Sarah, I guess, mentioned it, was that how could we put that to them in a way that they won't reject it? Well, that may not be easy, you know, but first you have to just invite the Spirit of God to intervene to make sure it's said right. And you're going to have to come. The Lord does say, if you see someone involved in trouble, you reprimand them or you counter them, but very gently.
Yeah.
You don't put the hammer to them, you know, and threaten them or accuse them of something that's going to be taken as a guilt thing. You know, you don't want a Pharisee on them. But on the other hand, you very gently let them know that they may be heading into a dangerous situation there. Yeah. And it's like I said, you can't give advice to someone who doesn't want to be advised.
That's exactly right.
If they want to be advised, fine, you know. If they don't want to be, you just well shut up. Because you're just, all you're going to do is just make them all the more angry.
Yeah.
But hopefully they'll think of a way to put that. But, you know, there was one other thing I was mentioned, this top paragraph about redemption. We use the word redeem. And when you put R-E on the front of a word, what are you doing?
Meaning it's going to happen again?
Yeah.
Or it's happening again.
If you rebuild something, what do you do?
Build it again.
Or if you repay someone, what do you do?
Pay him again.
Yeah. If you
Pay him back.
Reclaim something, anything, you the word deem. What does deem mean?
I'm going to read it. Means to consider something in a certain way.
Yeah. Or that's your opinion of something, isn't it?
Yeah.
I deem that it's necessary to do this or that.
Yeah.
Or I deem that you maybe need to do something, you know, anything. It's your feeling about something. Or how you look at something, how you consider. So to redeem, well, you'd have to put a change, a new way of looking at something. Would it be okay?
Reconsider.
Yeah. So when the Lord first looked at Israel in Egypt, what was he deeming about them?
You mean, what were they in actuality, or what was he?
How would God see them as they were in Egypt?
My children are living as slaves.
Well, no, he wouldn't quite. He wouldn't call them that. He wouldn't call them my children. Exactly. He called those slaves are living like slaves. Why? Why are they living like slaves? Because that's what they are.
Yeah.
But when they've been redeemed, after they crossed through the Red Sea and they've done all these things, he thinks about them differently. Does he now call them those slaves from Egypt?
They're children now.
Yeah, now they're my people. So he's redeemed them. He's thought about them differently. Now, they used the word redeem in the old slave situation in the early days. You know, in England, if you go back to England about the year 1800 or before, the economy of England was based on slavery almost altogether.
Yeah.
They took in huge amounts of money on slavery.
Yeah.
And of course, the slave trade, that's what, you remember John Newton, who wrote Amazing Grace?
Yes.
He was a slave trader. he was a captain of a ship that hauled slaves.
Oh yeah.
So the slave tribes would go to Africa, and they would get slaves from whoever the thugs were that captured the slaves. Yeah. They'd haul them across to New York and sell them at the slave market. Now, they would sell them at what we think of as a wholesale price. Who would they sell them to?
People who needed the help.
Yeah. Or they might sell them to someone who wants to resell them. We have in marketing something called wholesale buyers.
Right.
When the store buys the product, what do they pay for it? They pay wholesale, right?
Price, yeah. With the intention of selling them.
Okay, so then they turn around and retail it. So what are they doing here?
They're making a profit off.
Because they buy the product from the supplier at the minimum price called wholesale.
Yeah.
Then they add their uptake on it and sell it to the the public at retail. So of course the difference is then that's their profit.
Right.
So when they'd bring slaves over, they could sell them as wholesale. Let's say a plantation owner wanted 200 slaves, so he goes to the market and buys at wholesale price 200 slaves.
Mm-hmm. And
they're brought back out, and now he's going to put them to work on his plantation. But now he'd have a certain price that he pays. Now comes along a guy and says, I want to buy one slave to work in my house. Is he going to get it for the same price as the guy that bought 200 of them?
No, he's going to make a little cut on it.
Yeah, so it's going to be a higher price.
Right.
So you got a wholesale price, you got retail price. But in our world, that's in our world, but in the old world, they had another price. And that was, you'd have the wholesale price, the shipper or the one that's traveling over selling them to those who are going to resell them. Mm-hmm. Then you had the retail price for those who were going to use them for themselves. But you had one more price, and that's if someone just felt sorry for the slave, wanted to buy them to set them free.
Redemption price.
Redemption price. Now, which is the most expensive one?
Redemption price?
Why?
Because you got to recoup your losses of not having that person a slave anymore.
That's right. If you're buying to work for you, you get your money back by the work he does for you, right? But if all you're going to do is set him free, then what do you get for that?
Nothing.
He may not even say thanks.
Right.
You won't get anything back. So it's a complete cost. You literally gave everything for the guy with no return whatsoever, right? So that's even if you paid exactly the same as the retail guy, you're really paying more because you don't get any work out of the guy. The guy that retail, at least he can work the guy and get his money back in work, can he?
Yeah.
So redemption price was to set him free. And the old law was, I guess it was in England or somewhere, maybe even earlier than that, but once you were redeemed by that law, the law said you could never again be sold as a slave. You'd actually have the price of freedom. You become a free citizen.
A piece of paper.
Yeah, some kind of a way to prove that. But so when you think about what price did the Lord pay for our salvation?
Redemption price?
The redemption price. Why? Because he bought us not to work for him, but to be set free from slavery.
Yeah.
So once the Lord has redeemed you, you're no longer a slave, and by law, you can never again become a slave. What law?
Torah.
Yeah, not the American government law or the Roman law. Those are filled with thugs. But the Lord's law says, now I've set you free, and you are free indeed. Isn't that the way it says?
Yeah.
That means, what does indeed mean?
It means faux show.
You're really free.
Yeah.
And if you're really free, you can never be captured again. So anyway, that's what redemption means. And
that's good.
But you know, it's interesting how this little syllable R-E changes everything on something, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If you you reword something. What are you doing?
Changing the words up.
You're saying it in a different way.
Yeah.
So to redeem means God thinks about his people differently than the first time, because he's got a new way to look at them. And the reason he looks at them differently is because they've been born again into a new life. So if you have a new life, you're going to be seen as those different from the one who had only the old life. But of course, since it's a matter of the heart, it doesn't show outwardly. It only shows inwardly, where God sees the heart,
Yeah.
But anyway, I came with all these thoughts about noon. That little letter, it's one of the three middle letters of the Aleph Tav. You got Lamed and Mem. Well, four letters: Yud, Lamed, Mem, and Nun. And Yud is the hand of God. Lamed is the shepherd's staff. Mem is the living water. Nun is the new beginnings.
Yeah.
You can just see the whole gospel in those four letters, can't you?
Yeah.
Usually four is an indication of the Lord himself, the four-faceted being.
Yeah.
In the Garden of Eden, it says there was four rivers, or the headwaters of the water that watered the garden came from four rivers.
Yeah.
You remember the names of them? It was the
Euphrates.
Not the Tigris, Euphrates, the Pishon, the Gahon, and the Hadakel, I think it is. And Euphrates means, I think it means the good river or something like that, the good water.
Yeah.
Pishon has to do with a water that is, let's see, how was that?
Jim, I got to run.
Do you?
Yeah, I got to run into Fred Meyer's.
Oh, you got to empty your tank?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll just drive over there. Okay. One of them means a sparkling or a flowing river that moves quickly,
Yeah.
And one of them means it says that where the gold was, it's very valuable and great.
Yeah.
And anyway, those four rivers there again are a picture of the Lord himself. He is the living water. You can be sure if they watered the garden, it was living water, wasn't it?
Yes, it
Because
was.
in that garden was nothing but life.
Yeah.
No hurt, no pain, no suffering, or nothing. And there are those who think they're going to try to find the Garden of Eden. They'll never find it because it doesn't exist anymore. There's no such thing as the Garden of Eden. It went away because it was undone when evil came. Here you're pretty close to
Yeah,
the adventure end point.
much closer than this.